All right, in this video, we are going to be making rice packs for our first kind of a major sewing project. So what you're going to need is 2 pieces of fabric. Both pieces need to be cut 7 inches by 13 inches. Now, I have 2 pieces of fabric that complement each other, okay? But if I wanted to, I could have 2 of the exact same fabric front and back. It doesn't have to be 2 separate designs, okay? But we need 2 pieces that are 7 inches by 13 inches. What I would recommend is that a lot of our fabric, especially some of the scrap or smaller pieces of fabric, could have some wrinkles or some folds in them. So I recommend, after you cut them all out, to go back and iron them on the ironing board to get any type of lines or creases out of your fabric. After that's done, you guys are going to take your 2 pieces, and we have what's called the right side and the wrong side of your fabric. So you can tell really easily on patterns that have, or fabric that has patterns like this, the right side of the material is like the pretty side, the correct side of your material. The wrong side is the back side, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the right side of this fabric here with the shoes, and I'm going to take the right side of this blue fabric. You can tell, I think you can tell in the picture, this is brighter on one side and it's like more dull on the other side. Here, I'll fold it over like this. So this would be the right side and the wrong side of my material. And we're going to take both of the right sides and lay them on top of each other. So essentially, you're having both the pretty sides in the middle, okay? So this is the right sides against right sides put together. So I have the wrong side and the wrong side on the outside part of it. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew around this rectangle, okay? I probably would start on like one of your short sides, one of the short widths. But what we're going to do is we're going to start sewing where my finger's at here. We're going to start sewing here, go all the way around the rectangle until you come back, and then we're going to stop sewing about right here. So between my fingers right here, this part in here will still be opened. You're not going to seam all the way shut. Okay, so let's just make sure we're clear on this. We're going to start on this end over here, sew all the way down and around and back up, and then stop sewing right here so that we leave essentially an opening roughly about maybe 2 inches or so that's not sewn. All right, so now I'm at my sewing machine, and it's going to be just a basic straight stitch. So on your screen here, your screen selector should say 0, 1. When you first plug it in, it says 0, 0. So you're going to have to hit this plus sign on the right side to make it a 1. So that's just our normal straight stitch that we're going to do. And I'm going to take my fabric here. Now I'll go ahead and clip mine. And you should always clip around the outsides of your material before you sew. Just helps to make sure that nothing gets shifted as you're sewing. So I'm going to see the clips there. Clip the 2 pieces of fabrics together. You don't need to clip too much. It's only little pieces of fabric. So maybe like, I don't know, 8 to 10 clips. That should be enough to hold your fabric together. Okay, so as you can tell here, I have my 2 pieces of fabric and they're clipped together going all the way around. All right, so I'm gonna place it inside my sewing machine here. My presser foot is up. I have the correct thread color that I would like to use, and I am going to slide it down to where I want to start sewing, drop my presser foot down. Your machine will not start sewing unless this presser foot is down against your fabric. So remember, you have a lever back here that lifts it up and down. So when that's down, that means we are able to start sewing. And with any project, anytime you start or finish, you want to make sure you do a reverse stitch. And that's this circle button up here that looks like kind of like a U-turn sign. So as I start, and another reminder is to make sure that your fabric is, oopsies, to like line up with the side of your presser foot. So if I lift this up, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit so you guys can see this better. I don't want my fabric to go way past the presser foot here. I want to make sure it's lined up right against the edge, so you actually really can't even see it because it's right up against the presser foot. That'd be the perfect width that we want to keep as we're going to be sewing these rice packs, okay? So when we start, we're going to do just a couple stitches, start off slow. Okay, after you do about 2 or 3 stitches, I'm going to have you hit this reverse button and hold it And as you're pushing the pedal, you'll notice that it goes backwards. Okay, that's why it reverses. So I took a couple stitches in, hit the reverse button, and it went a couple stitches back. From here, we've kind of locked in the starting position, and we're just gonna start sewing. Keeping the fabric against the side of my presser foot. And when you get close to the edge, but not too close, because I want to make sure that I can lift up my presser foot, pivot the material around, and then close it again, that it's pretty close to the side of my presser foot, and I'm going to keep sewing down this long side of my rice bag here. When you come to a clip before you get to the presser foot, you can remove your clip, put it back in your box, and then keep sewing. And when you're about a 1/4 inch or so before the edge of the fabric, we're going to stop the machine. The needle should stay in the down position. I'm going to lift up my presser foot, pivot my fabric, and then I can go ahead and continue sewing down the short side. If for some reason you are sewing and you go too far to the edge and you're just way too close, you can totally hit that back button, back it up a little bit, and then we can still do our pivot from there. Now we're back to the side that we started at. So if you can tell or not, right here where my finger is where we started our stitch. I'm just gonna go a couple stitches in here, do like 10 or so stitches, do my little reverse stitch, and then stop. So this opening from where the needle is to where my thumb is, this part has not been sewn yet, which is fine because we need a spot to pour the rice in. So that part's gonna stay unsewn for right now. Go ahead and take your piece out of the machine. Okay, and now you have something that's been starting sewn up here, gone all the way around, and stopped up here, and there's an opening between my two fingers here. So from here, grab your pair of fabric scissors, okay? And if you notice the corners here, hopefully you can see that, I'm going to trim off the corners. Now the careful part about this is you don't want to trim through your actual seam you just made, because obviously that's just going to make your item come apart. So don't go too close, so you can see this. Okay, if you can see that. Don't go too close to the seam, but you want to trim off that corner so you can still see my seam here. That just helps with like the bulk on the corners when you flip it, eventually flip it the right side out. You want to kind of get rid of some of that bulk there on the corners. So again, if you see where my stitches are at versus where I cut, don't cut through the corner of my seam or your item's going to fall apart there. And so you should have all 4 corners cut. From here then, we can have some fun. Flip it out so we can actually see our pretty sides then. Okay, so take your opening and we're going to essentially shove the material through the opening. Flip it the right side out. Now use your fingers at this point in time to kind of pull out the fabric, push out the corners as you're kind of pulling out. It takes a couple minutes or so to flip it out completely. Make sure you go to all 4 corners, put your fingers inside and push out those corners. One thing that you don't want to do at this point in time is you don't want to take anything sharp like scissors or a pencil or a seam ripper and use that to poke out the corners, because if you use things sharp, you're actually going to puncture a hole through the corner of your fabric, which is not going to work. So use your finger or like flip it to the eraser side of your pencil. Sometimes like a little chunkier crochet hook helps push out those corners as well. So they have some options, but don't use anything sharp. And again, I want to come down here and push out these corners here. Okay, so now I have, flip it the right way here, my rice bag sewn, and I still have that one opening, which is what we're going to use to pour the rice in. Before we do the rice though, I will heavily recommend that you take your little pouch here, back to the ironing board. So if you notice, you have some obviously ends that are not completely, they're not complete, so they're gonna fray and stuff. Use your fingers to kind of flip that raw material in, essentially where you kind of want it to line up eventually when we sew that hole shut. And I would recommend doing this. It makes it easier when you eventually go back to sew it shut. Just iron this edge here to crease those folds. It just helps keep that fabric in where we need it to go. And then you can go fill up with your rice and whatever fragrance that you want to potentially dye or have on your rice. So go ahead and iron that, fill it up with the rice, and when we come back, we're going to seam this shut. All right, so we're back here, and yes, this fabric does look different than what I was using because I already had a bag kind of ready to go, so I'm going to use this to show you how to sew it shut. But this bag has already been, it's front and back here. I already had the pretty sides together. I already sewed around the outside of the pouch. I had an opening here that I'm going to sew shut, and I already filled my bag with rice. Now, when you do fill the bag with rice, there should be instructions back by the rice, but we're looking at about 4 to 4.5 cups of rice. If you do more than that, it's way too bulky and big, and you're just not going to like it. So do probably about 4 cups of rice. Kind of feel around, see if you like how much it is. If you want to do another half cup more, that's okay. But no more than 4.5 cups because it just gets too big. So with that, obviously, we now have some weight here with the rice. So if you can do it on your own, that's fine. You may also want to ask a friend, because what we're going to do is we're going to put this fabric, the edge, the opening of our pouch here, inside the machine to sew. And sometimes with the weight of the fabric on the left side, it kind of pulls on the fabric. It pulls it to the left, which we don't want that to happen, and that can kind of make your lines weird or potentially break a needle. So if you have a friend nearby that's maybe waiting on something, have them hold this bag just about the height of what your sewing machine table is as you sew. They don't do anything else, just hold the bag, and that will help take some weight off that left side there for you when you're sewing. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to do a thing called a top stitch, and you're going to be doing this quite a bit throughout the class. Essentially, it's a stitch that's going to close up that hole there. And what you want to do, first of all, you want to make sure it goes through both layers. Otherwise, obviously, that's not going to completely close up your pouch there. And we also want it to be a seam that goes as close as you can to the edge of the fabric without going off the fabric. So my opening is like right here. If you can see this, it's like right here on the bag. So I want a stitch that goes right along the edge to close up that hole. I'm going to actually start a little bit past where my last stitch was, go all the way down where the opening is, and kind of go past where I started at. Of course, doing a reverse stitch on both sides, but we're going to be seaming from like where my thumb is to where this thumb is to sew it shut. But again, getting it very close to the edge and going through both layers. All right, so let's start sewing this here. So if you see where my finger is at, this is at the top of my finger is where the edge of my fabric is when I stop sewing. So when I put this inside my machine, I'm actually going to back it up. It's kind of overlap a little bit. I'm going to start it where a little bit behind where I ended. That just makes sure that I know it's secure and that there's not going to be any rice that ends up falling out of it. I usually like to take my hand wheel off here on the side and drop my needle down just to kind of see where my needle is going to line up. Like I said, I want it to be on the edge without going off. And I want to make sure, obviously, that it is where I would like it to kind of stay lined up. So, in fact, I'm going to adjust one thing here. This is why you test it out before you sew here. So I'm going to line this back up where I'd like it at, keeping it very close to the edge of my fabric there. Start off going slow. Do about 2 stitches and then reverse stitch. All right, now I'm going to take it slow. Every time you go fast, then your top stitch is going to look kind of wonky. So take it slow, go straight across right along the edge of the fabric there. Okay, so I went past where my starting point was just to make sure that we overlap some of those stitches a little bit. Do your reverse to close it off. And then go ahead and take it out of your machine. take your scissors, and just be careful when you're cutting so you don't accidentally cut through the actual fabric itself, and trim off the extra threads there that come from the beginning and end of your machine. Okay, so to show you what this looks like, if you can see that top stitch there, I did it in yellow, so sorry for the color on there. But if you see that stitch right along the edge there, that is my top seam. That's what I'm talking about, getting really close to the edge of your fabric, okay? It helps, if you pick colors that blend in with your material, that also is the best. So I didn't have a gray, but I should have maybe used a gray for the top, and that helps blend it in more. But keep it really close to the edge, making sure that you go along both sides of your fabric. See, you can see it on this side too. There you go. If you see that stitch there, so it's along the side. And then when you think you have it all sewn shut, you can flip it upside down, and as long as no rice falls out of it and you don't see any opening holes and all your ends are tucked in, then you're good to go. So this would be your completed rice pack when you're all done.